Welcome back to the Classic and Current Gaming Podcast, a weekly podcast where we look at the history and development of video games. I'm your host, RxDude22, and we're nearing the end of Season 2 of the podcast, which is also coinciding with the end of Season 7 of the Retro Gaming League. The Retro Gaming League is a fun, friendly competition we have on Facebook where pages come together each week and compete against each other in a different retro video game. This being the last week of the regular season for the Retro League, the game this week is Castlevania Chronicles for the PlayStation 1. Let's jump into the podcast. Castlevania Chronicles is a video game compilation developed by Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo for the PlayStation. It consists of two game modes. Original Mode, which is a port of the 1993 platform video game Akamojo Dracula for the Sharp X68000 home computer, and Arrange Mode, a modernized remake featuring a new introductory cinematic, new sprites, and rebalanced gameplay among other adjustments. The X68000 version of Akamojo Dracula is itself an update remake of the original Castlevania for the NES, where the vampire hunter Simon Belmont must defeat Dracula and save Transylvania. The compilation was later released for the American and Japanese PlayStation Network as a PS1 classic in December 2008. Gameplay. Akamojo Dracula was designed to take advantage of the X68000 hardware with an updated, more complex game engine than the original Castlevania. This allowed for stages to be redesigned to accommodate intricate, dynamic obstacles, as well as the creation of new stages exclusive to this version of the game. One feature is the ability to diagonally attack enemies and obstacles from below. It also retains all special items and sub-weapons from the original, as well as introducing the new rare item known as the Herb, which can refill the player health in exchange for hearts. Hidden items worth points and 1-ups appear throughout the game should the player duck or stand in particular locations. Additionally, the game retains Castlevania's looping feature, where the game will keep track of how many stages the player has cleared on consecutive playthroughs before reaching a game over. However, unlike the original Castlevania's single higher difficulty setting activated at the start of a second playthrough, the X68000 Akamojo Dracula allows for 6 consecutive playthroughs of increasing difficulty before reaching its difficulty cap. Due to the X68000 Akamojo Dracula's reputation for being extremely difficult, Castlevania Chronicles features an Arrange Mode that adjusts game balance for a more accessible experience. Completing Arrange Mode unlocks special features including an art gallery, as well as a time attack mode. Exclusive to the US and European versions of Chronicles, the art gallery features artwork by Ayami Kojima for Chronicles and Castlevania Symphony of the Night, as well as an interview with Koji Igarashi. The time attack mode allows the player to race through any stage, complete with a time meter to beat their best time. Audio. The music for the X68000 game contains a variety of new arrangements of familiar tunes from the series as well as brand new compositions altogether. Before each game, the player is given a choice between 3 different sound modules: the X68000's FM synthesizer, MIDI Roland LA MT32, CM32L, CM64, and MIDI Roland GS, SC55, SC33, SC155, CM300, CM500. There is also a hidden general MIDI sound module option that is missing in the Castlevania Chronicles. While the soundtrack will remain the same throughout the game regardless of which sound module is chosen, the instrumentation may vary and some songs may be arranged slightly different. Sota Fujimori, staff composer for the Konami Corporation in Japan, performed all new arrangements of the soundtrack for Castlevania Chronicles Arrange Mode. In the Japanese Chronicles, unlike the US and European versions, the sound hardware selection screen automatically appears before starting game on Original Mode, just as it did in Castlevania for the Sharp X68000. A code must be entered to reach it in either mode in the US and European versions, while the Japanese version only requires one to be entered in Arrange Mode. Audio-wise, the Japanese version of Chronicles had slowdown issues with the music playback. These were fixed for the US and European releases. Development. The PlayStation re-release Castlevania Chronicles expanded much more to the X68000 game. This includes a new rendered intro and ending, with new character designs by Ayami Kojima for Simon Belmont and Dracula, improved graphical effects, enhanced music and sound effects, and a more balanced and adjustable difficulty level. Players can choose to play this arranged mode version of the game with all the new features intact, or play the original mode version as was originally presented on the Sharp X68000. While the original mode presented on Chronicles is otherwise identical to the X68000 game, there are a few limitations since it is emulated on different hardware. One noticeable difference is the brief floating times that now appear before boss fights and stages. The other drawback is the lack of an internal clock on the PlayStation. The original game utilizes the X68000's internal time and date settings. The time on the clock tower during the boss fight on stage 15 would reflect the X68000's current time, and the color scheme used on the painting in stage 21 would reflect one of the 4 seasons according to the computer's current date. That's pretty cool. On the PlayStation game, each time the system is turned on, the time and date have to be manually adjusted only after a hidden extra option menu is accessed by inputting an alternate version of the Konami code. Regional differences. The American and European versions contain an interview with Koji Igarashi and a gallery featuring artwork by Ayami Kojima from Castlevania Chronicles and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. The latter images were already featured in the Sega Saturn version of Symphony of the Night. The gallery is unlocked by clearing stages in arranged mode. The artwork of the succubus was censored since her chest in the original was exposed. In the US and European versions of Chronicles, the player can save the game at stage 24, the battle with Dracula. Some enemies, such as red skeletons and peeping eyes, do not award points in the original Japanese release. This was modified in the international releases, and the latter Japanese PSN release has been altered in order to match these features. The player's whip and sub-weapons have different hitboxes between various versions. Due to porting issues, the sub-weapons will not break fake walls and ice walls in the US and European versions. On stage 5, block 2-2, a candle is added in the US and European versions. This candle can be seen in the Japanese version, but only if the player backtracks to the candle. The screen size of the international releases have been slightly altered, and the current unload areas on the top of the screen will sometimes show a strange purplish line. This also results in the spawning points for the Medusa heads on stages 10 and 13, blocks 4-1 and 5-1, to move to a higher point. The international releases used a modified background for the following bridge section of stage 16, block 6-1. On stage 23, block 8-2, a giant bat is missing in the original Japanese release. This appears to be the result of a coding error, as the original X68000 version of the stage has the bat properly in position. On stage 24, block 8-3, at the exit of the first screen, a Persephone will always spawn in front of a column in the Japanese release. This specific Persephone will not spawn in the following international releases. On the US and European versions, you have to press down, L1, R1, and X buttons on the original mode option in the main menu to reach the sound hardware selection screen. In the US and European versions, the Japanese voices of the French dolls in stage 17 have been completely removed. A little bit of trivia and tidbits of the game. On stage 9, a Count Orlok lookalike from the film Nosferatu appears in the background, frozen in a block of ice. On stage 11, a giant statue of the Greek goddess Athena cries tears of blood, a reference to Bloody Tears, the piece that plays during the stage. On stage 14, stage 114, fifth playthrough on block 6-3, a cartoon image of Simon Belmont will appear smoking a cigarette accompanied by a Japanese text in one of the background mirrors. The text translates to, "Here's fake Simon." The programming behind mirrors found on block 6-3 is that the reflection is actually background layer 3. This can be seen in an emulator by displaying online layers, allowing to see the full reflection of the mirrors. This also includes the graffiti of Simon, regardless of how many playthroughs the player has accumulated by that point. On stage 21, the last section has a giant painting in the background of a field with mountains. For the original X68000 game, the painting will reflect one of the 4 seasons, depending what the computer's internal clock date is set at. During March through May, the background will show spring. From June through August, the background will show summer. During September through November, the background is in autumn. From December through February, the background will show winter. For Castlevania Chronicles, since the PlayStation doesn't have an internal clock, an extra option menu can be accessed where the player can set the date. When the game is turned off, however, the date information will not save. The clock during the fight against the Wolf Woman is also affected by the X68000's clock, adjusting to whatever time it is. Again, the PlayStation version must have the extra option feature enabled with the time properly set. The loading background music that plays when the X68000 version is loading off of the floppy disk was later featured as the sole background music of Stage 4 in Castlevania The Adventure Rebirth. The original X68000 version contains two image files named omaki1.pic and omaki2.pic. Omaki1.pic displays artwork for the Flame Knight and Skull Knight, while omaki2.pic displays artwork for the Peeping Eye and Fishman. Reception. Castlevania Chronicles has been met with mixed to positive reviews. IGN rated the PlayStation release 7.8, saying it was a lot of fun. GameSpot gave the same release a 6.1, saying it lacked replay value and was graphically outdated. Game Informer's Tim Turry felt that it wasn't the worst option for people who wanted a classic Castlevania. Scott Steinberg reviewed the PlayStation version of the game for Next Generation, rated it 3 stars out of 5, and stated that grade A smack for Castlevania collectors and a damn fine experiment in classic gaming for everyone else. All the information here was provided by Wikipedia and Castlevania Wiki. And that concludes episode 28 of the podcast. It's episode 18 of season 2. It's a weekly podcast here that we have where we look at the history and development of video games. There's multiple ways to check out the podcast. You can watch it on YouTube, you can listen to it on Spotify, or your other favorite listening platform as well. Next week, we don't know what the game is yet because going forward for the Retro Gaming League, the games are drawn on a week-to-week basis. So we'll have a new game for you next week here on the podcast. What it is, you'll have to tune in to find out. Hope you have a great week. It's been ArxDude22 from the Classic and Current Gaming Podcast signing out. Keep on gaming. Be good to each other. See you on the next stream. And you'll hear me on the next podcast, which will be next week. Everybody have a great day. Thank you for listening, and see you next time. Take care, everybody.